Welcome everyone to our panel discussion on sustainable economic models within this EU-CONEXUS framework. As you know, EU-CONEXUS brings together coastal universities to address these unique challenges faced by coastal regions, different challenges in the context of climate change and basically focusing on sustainability. As you know, and another moderator said yesterday, coastal cities are especially attractive for their beauty and prosperity, and also for the facility for logistic activities. But this is also a peril that could seriously difficult their sustainability. It is an unstable equilibrium, not only from the use and abuse of natural resources, but also from economic dynamics and especially their social implications. We are a community living together, facing the environment and focusing into the future. But as almost all the researchers know, sustainability is essentially a probabilistic issue. We don't have all the required data to decide, and we are absolutely not certain about the true model that governs the future. It is for this that we must guess about, one, the proper use of resources of different natures, natural resources with different degrees of reproducibility, capital investments, embedding different technologies, research and development activities, human capital, and so on. But also, and it is even more important, that we must be aware of the reason, the objective, the reason we manage resources. Social welfare. What is social welfare? Social welfare cannot be only defined at the individual level, but often also as a common or even relational good, as Professor Zamagni will argue in the final lecture. As you probably know, essentially, sustainable economic models shift from a linear approach to focus on economic prosperity. But these models involve systemic changes. And systemic changes require choices, investment, public or private, policies, innovation to move away from GDP-focused growth towards a more resilient and equitable future. Sometimes creativity is destructive, as Schumpeter and recently Agion Howitt, Nobel Prizes 1 week ago or a few weeks ago, in 1992 explained, one must take into account social interactions and time preferences when designing to boost growth and welfare. In this panel, we aim to explore different perspectives on sustainable economic models and the implications for coastal communities that, together with attractive, as I said, are particularly vulnerable to economic dynamics. We have four distinguished, important specialists. Professor Helen Hughes has been teaching in Southeast Technological University in the areas of inorganic chemistry, good laboratory practice, and quality management, including lean manufacturing. It's only a brief synthesis. And her presentation will focus on circular economy and the challenge of a sustainable economy. She will highlight main challenges, but also potential obstacles and perils associated with it. Then Juan Requena, he is the practitioner, the manager, He is Director of Innovation and Venture in KMZero, Food Innovation Hub, an initiative of Familia Martinez Group. He will bring his experience in KMZero as one of the transformers of the food industry. They have aligned their initiative to the challenges, showing us they consider possible to transform threats into opportunities for the economic sustainability of their project. Well, our third panelist, Professor Pierre Labardin, he is a researcher and also professor in management sciences, and also director of IAE at La Rochelle University. He's also co-responsible of the Master in Tourism. He will add a long-term vision perspective focusing on the scalability of economic models to be sustainable. Sometimes some initiatives seem to be sustainable but cannot be escalated, suggesting new management tools that could be eventually aligned with the goal of sustainability. And finally, we have an online panelist. Finally, he had a technical problem to attend physically this session, but he will connect online. He is Professor Pablo Fernández, researcher at Ingenio. Ingenio is an initiative of SIC UPV, Polytechnic University of Valencia. He is expert in transitions, governance, and especially trade-offs, a very important issue when facing realities around socio-ecologic systems. And also, he says, the study of the common goods. He will focus today on the importance of soil health. Oh, soil is an important asset, and the different dimensions, not only for housing market, also for agriculture, and also for social health. Our Vice-Rector, that is José María Tormos, he's also a specialist in brain health, and I guess that soil is also important for a lot of dimensions related to the establishment of societies, individuals forming societies in coastal locations. He will focus on soil health, I said, not only as a main driver of productivity, but also as a crucial element for society's engagement. So it's a privilege to have this panelist today. And well, I give the floor to Professor Hughes. She will start with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks to Juan for the kind introduction and to the EU-CONEXUS for the invitation to talk to you today. So I'm going to talk about the circular economy. So this is a well-known diagram here from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and all this is doing is just showing you that the circular economy isn't a simple aspect. That there's two parts to it, the part that is result with finite materials and the parts that can have renewables. Finite materials, things like reuse, recycle, refurbishment, and then in the renewables, things like anaerobic digestion, biogas, regeneration. Okay, so again, all it's telling you is that the circular economy is a quite complex area. There are many benefits to looking at the circular economy as an economic model, from environmental benefits, economic benefits, and social benefits. So just to state very simply what these are in terms of the environmental benefits, the obvious ones are things like waste reduction. If you're reusing and repairing things, you're reducing the amount of waste that you produce. This leads to resource conservation in terms of finite resources, because again, we're reusing that material, which should result in lower carbon emissions. And as we all know, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is a priority for Europe and the world currently. Also helps us to get our SDGs and deliver those. In terms of economic benefits, there's things like cost savings as a result of minimizing your resource inputs, job creation in the new innovative ideas that occur as a result of the circular bioeconomy, and then the innovation and the leading to new markets, which is what we all hope will result out of it. But there's also social benefits that sometimes people aren't that clear on. Things like community resilience by promoting sustainability practices and reducing your dependencies on finite resources that can support local economies. It also requires a big cultural shift towards sustainable consumption and production patterns, and we'll come back to that idea again later on. So there are challenges associated with the circular economy, which most people realise. And one of the main challenges is that it requires high initial investment costs. Okay? If you're looking at your waste, reducing that waste and coming up with ideas as to how you can use it, then there will be initial investment costs. However, this has the knock-on effect of reducing resource dependency, especially in areas where resources are finite and maybe resources are hard to come by. A second challenge is in the redesign of the products and supply chain. And in theory, this is the most important bit, that you design it and redesign it so that you're not producing the waste in the first place. Okay? However, that's too big of a challenge for most industries to face. Okay? However, as a result of accepting this challenge, you could have improved brand reputation, stakeholder trust, and as people become more environmentally aware and environmentally conscious, it's up to consumers to demand these sort of materials. A third challenge is the difficulty in measuring your multi-dimensional value. So, how do you measure that, and how do you realize that, and how do you tell your stakeholders or your customers that it has value? As regulations change, and again, one of the points we'll be making later on is that policy needs to change to support the circular economy, then compliance with emerging regulations will result, and therefore you are meeting those compliance. The need for cross-sectoral collaboration and innovation is key, and perhaps EU-CONEXUS can deliver some of that innovation and cross-collaboration in order to come up with these new ideas and new concepts, and this leads to access to new markets and business models, which is essential for the circular economy. So just a small example from SETU. An industry approached us from the shellfish processing industry with a problem that they had a lot of waste shells. Okay, and they were looking for an application, a circular bioeconomy application from the waste shells. So we took their waste shells, and we've been working with those for a while, and we found that when you treat them, they have very good antimicrobial properties, broad spectrum, gram-positive and gram-negative. We have applied them in wastewater treatment. They're exceedingly good at phosphate removal and nitrate removal from waste streams. They can be used in areas like bioplastics, for sustainable green chemical catalysis, as antioxidants, and perhaps in bone engineering. So there's a lot of applications from what is ultimately a waste material that people started looking at because they could no longer dump it into the sea. So again, another project in SETU where we looked at how we could add high value from products from marine waste. And in this, we engaged with fish producers and processors to identify and quantify the major marine waste that occurred in the southeast of Ireland, where our university is based. We evaluated extraction methods, scientific and patent literature for potential high-value pharmaceutical uses or applications, and feed that into the ongoing and future research from the circular bioeconomy, based upon research that's carried out on what is there in the southeast of Ireland. So, how do we overcome these key barriers? Well, partnerships are key, and to come up with novel, innovative ideas, you require the building of cross-sectorial innovation platforms. So we need innovation, we need people to think outside the box, but isn't that true of all science? And we need people to form these partnerships to come up with new ideas. There is ecological responsibilities in terms of ecosystem preservation and restoration, and that has to become central objectives to a lot of what we do in research and also what people do in industry. We need regenerative business practices that enhance biodiversity, strengthen climate resilience and foster social inclusion. And we cannot ever underestimate the idea of the social inclusion aspect of these research in order to have real impact going forward in terms of what we do and what we produce. The triple line bottom effects are ecological, social and economic. Okay? And the circular bioeconomy can certainly add to these three bottom lines and give ecological, social and economical advantages. Where's next beyond circular thinking? Maybe a nature positive economy where nature becomes central to production and central to the economy. An example of this might be agroforestry, for example. So, some thoughts in terms of the circular economy. Are we promoting solutions acceptable to the ones that created the issues in the first place? So, in other words, are we coming up with a solution to waste that's produced by people in industry in the first place? Should we think about a concept of redesign? How expensive is redesign? Is it an option at all? Okay, I don't know the answer to these questions, but I'm just putting them forward for thought. There are lovely successful stories out there in terms of what can be done, and these are just a few of them I just picked by random because I kind of liked them. The first one is Loop in the USA, which is refillable packaging system. So you can see that in terms of things like your washing powder, for example. You can bring it along and get it refilled as opposed to producing new packaging. Fair-phoned, repairable electronics rather than what we currently have, which is just throw them out, okay, and get a new one. Biobean, which is a nice idea of using coffee waste, of which there is quite a large quantity, and converting that into biofuel. Veolia water reuse, which was industrial water recycling on a larger scale. And then this idea of repair cares, which again I quite liked, this idea of community repair initiatives. If you have experts in your community, say electronics for example, and the community brings all their waste materials to a particular session and then it's all repaired globally. So ideas thinking outside the box. What is the role of policy on all of this? Okay, so without policy change, we're not going to see real change. Okay, so unless there's an incentive, a tax incentive, a policy incentive, a regulatory incentive, we won't see real change in terms of the circular economy. So the Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy is one such, grants funding for green SMEs, tax breaks. And can we use AI? Everything is AI at the moment. So can we use AI to optimize processes for resource efficiency? So where to next in terms of EU-CONEXUS? Okay, so EU-CONEXUS has a ready-built set of collaborators with a ready-built set of expertise, and it's multi-dimensional and cross-functional. So I just chose one of these horizon calls to have a look at, and to just, it's supporting pre-normative research for standardization of the bio-based products. So again, ties directly into what we're talking about here. We're a ready-built network. This is a call in the Horizon Europe. I'm not sure if anyone would be interested in it, but it's an idea of something that we could collaborate through EU-CONEXUS. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. And now the floor is for Juan Requena from KMZero.
Thank you very much.
I will keep the questions for...
Oh, it's in Spanish. We send it in English. Problemas del directo.
A slight hitch.
Huh?
A slight hitch.
Yeah.
They're putting the correct version in English. Juan sent us many days ago. You will see that Juan is the only practitioner, manager in this panel. So essentially what he is going to bring to the panel is how, in the end, the concepts that we try to develop at the universities are understood by the different firms, because KMZero, as I said, is a foundation, if I am not mistaken.
Yeah, it's
promoted from a firm.
It's a foundation. It's by multiple food corporations that all collaborate, and I'm very glad to see that I'm so aligned with what you said. That's one of the key points in regards of circular economy and what we call food waste and food valorization. It's we are very aligned in that expression. So, well, I can't start now, but well, hello all. I'm Juan Requena. I'm Open Innovation Director at KMZero, at KMZero Food Innovation Hub. KMZero Food Innovation Hub, it's a community of, it's a foundation as a social entity, as an entrepreneurial entity, but it's a community of food corporations that believe in that food systems need to be changed to be more sustainable, to be more healthy, to be more resilient, to be more accessible to all humans, and that they start connecting with us for KMZero to support them in the process of making food systems this way. So I don't know if my slides might be going now.
They're almost here.
Or almost here.
Almost.
As Juan said, it was born from one Valencian food corporation called Familia Martinez, which is a big supplier for Mercadona in the meat space and in the ready-to-eat meal space, but also in the process of creating KMZero, different food corporations, like the biggest dairy company in Spain, Central Lechera Asturiana, one of the largest brewery companies in Spain, Mau San Miguel, also some Latin American companies like Grupo Arancia, ingredient company there, and other multinationals joined us for us to support the process in which we, through the integration of technology and through what we call an innovation and entrepreneurs and science, and through what we also call collective intelligence, we try to make this happen. So, thanks. So, but first we gotta start. I'm sure most of people in this conference know what the food industry is facing and the food systems are facing at the moment. We feel that there's climate change is real, and probably it's not new for people who are here, but it's new for a lot of people who actually don't believe in it. And this is making pressure in what's from the supply that food corporations need, the food that they need to use, the ingredients. This generates a problem in price and in cost, and also we're going through a more complex world. It's geopolitical wise and technology wise, right? AI has been implemented, and it's affecting everybody's life, and this generates some frenzy in the thought of food corporations, and also there's been some commercial tensions lately with the appearance of Donald Trump at the government, and also the war in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East. All of this generates that there's a very complex scenario for food systems. But we are lucky because, as Juan said, we try and think of where there's challenge, there's opportunity, and there's a way that we can make something good happen. And that's how we try and change the food systems. So that's where we see from challenges, we can see opportunities. We can see that AI can be a big challenge for the development of products, but it's also an opportunity to be more efficient and to be not only efficient on an economic level, but also on a sustainability level. We can see that accelerated innovation, more solutions, more science that can be applied into the industry, greater sustainability, not considering sustainability as something that has to be compliant from regulatory perspective, but also as an advantage, a competitive advantage for the food industry. And that's what basically we're doing. We are this community of food corporations. As you can see here, Familia Martinez is one of them, Vicky Foods, Grupo Arancia Industrial, Helados SETU, Huevos Guillén. And that's like the big logos all around KMZero. But on the outside, you can see startups, investors, and experts that are supporting us in the integration of this technology. And we wanted to go into more clear detail with more sustainability, because this sustainability is one of the layers we work on. It's very important, it's very relevant. It's the base of KMZero business case and where it emerged for, but we also grown to integrate other types of technologies and try to solve other types of problems. So this is a bit about our story. We were born in 2018 from Familia Martinez. After that, we needed to join a lot of smart people to support us in changing the food system. We couldn't do it by ourselves. So we started hosting one of the largest food tech summits in Europe called F-Talks Summit. You can see there, down there, one of the keynotes there. We also, gathering all these 150 experts in the food industry, started to generate some collective intelligence that we promoted through report, and that's Futuristic report. And we also had we believe that if we want to make a full change of the food system, we also have to start from education of young consumers. If we want them to eat healthy, we want them to actually know where they are eating products, where they come from, and what's the cost to bring it to the table. And that's where we started doing the Gastrogenius Kids program we still do today. And throughout the years, you can see that the KMZero squad in 2021, this is the gathering of all of these experts that nourish our community. We can see Sam Cass, which was the culinary chef for Barack Obama during his presidency. We can also see, I'm getting called now. Howard Safiros is an expert in sustainable systems. We also have Jody Puglisi, who was the founder of the first alternative protein burger by Beyond Meat. He was the creator of that product. He's a researcher at Stanford University. And all of this clarified in 2024 into two initiatives that we do now. The first one is the Open Innovation Initiative, where we try and do the more oriented, and that's the part that I manage, where we try to create projects that actually impact these food industries on an economical level and a sustainability level, that we have KPIs that measure the return of the projects. And then we have the think tank, which is a big gathering that we do in Madrid in February, where we try and bring all of these experts together, and we do some dynamics where they discuss, they comment, and we on the different topics that for us affect the food industry. This is a bit about ourselves. Let me go back. We have 600 startups across our ecosystem, 200 corporate partners, 200 plus that are around us trying to learn from us and learn how we can do this change. We have investors in our network with over 5 billion in assets under management, and we are present in 25 countries as KMZero and KMZero community, people that are with us in our community. And this is the loop that we try to bring to the food industry. It's help them be inspired about what's going to happen long term in the food systems, then understand the strategic insights on what's happening in the market, then connect with the relevant people, scientists, entrepreneurs, experts that can support them in changing this approach to business, and finally, impact and the creation of pilots. Talking about sustainability, we've supported one of our main food corporations. I didn't get the slide. So, for example, Central Lechera Asturiana, Capsa Vida, integrated one of the top tier, not only carbon emission, but also biodiversity solutions to monitor their impact and to improve their efficiency in sustainability and carbon emissions. We also support it by connecting Platos Tradicionales, one of the Familia Martinez companies, with NUCAPS, nanotechnologies. This is more of a health solution, but we're basically been able to reduce on 90% the salt that the Mercadona lasagna has, 90% by using this encapsulation solution. And also Angura Saginaga was able to develop their own plant-based brand through one project that they developed with us. And yes, a bit more about the events. Happy to invite you all here. We have 3 events: F-Talks Food Summit in Valencia and in Mexico, and then the think tank in Madrid. Basically, the F-Talk is more oriented into the promotion of the innovation that's happening in the food systems, and the think tank is more into the development of what should be the guidelines to change these food systems. And that's it on my side. Thank you very much for listening to me, and happy to.
Thank you, Juan. Now it's time for Pierre Labardin from La Rochelle University.
Well, thank you to all of us, and thank you for the invitation to present. What I will talk about you is much more in a long-term vision, and a long-term vision implies a view on the future and also a view on the past, and the way we saw resources before. I will just start. Oh no, that's not the good version. Okay. No. It's not
envió la última versión. Yeah, they're going to. En la cafetería, ¿dónde estabas?
Well, maybe you want me to talk a bit before the...
Yeah, we can start with... I'm sorry.
To propose improvisation. Yes, what I want mainly to talk is about the link between the way before where we see coastal resources and the way we only view these coastal resources as a way to make only profits for companies or for countries. And the way we did not understand before that we need to take into account the fact that there's some ecological and social impacts when you see only territories, spaces, coastal spaces as a financial profit. And no.
I'm going to send them again.
Okay. And in fact, well, I'm working in management science and more working in management history. And the fact that previously most of management tools were linked, very closely linked with only a financial view, not including any impact on social or ecological view. And at the meantime that since the Industrial Revolutions, for 200 years, there was a strong development of this management tool, including accounting tool, marketing tools, including only our own pleasure. And there's some consequences on ecological and social view, and we can make some link between the development of these views and of these tools and the decrease in ecological and social.
I think in 1 minute it will be. I don't know. Well, if you want, while they upload the presentation, I can make a question, maybe for Helen or for you too. You can have a concern that although we are aware, I think all the individuals here and in other locations, we are aware of the potential benefits of the circular economy. I guess that there are some reasons why we are resisting to move. We are making as if, for example, when you said, Helen, about different examples of initiatives towards circular economy, you were mentioning consumption goods, but you didn't mention, it's not your fault, but you didn't mention, for example, the car industry. I mean, in some goods where maybe the potential benefits would be higher, industries are not moving. Could you imagine some, I can imagine several reasons, but could you suggest some reasons? Maybe later, because the presentation is already here. But you can go and think about the answer.
I wanted to start with this map. It's a 200 years map of the coastal Africa before French imperialism. And here you can find with the line thickness and the color all the way we see 200 years ago resources of a coastal line. And all the way. For example, in black, you have only the slave and the potential on this space of slave. In yellow, you have gold. If I'm right, in red, you've got camwood, etc. It means at that time, and for 200 years, we have been thinking coastline in Europe, but also you see in Africa, and the way countries or companies see this coastline and only a potential of economic resources to be produced at that time. And there's some consequences on that. It means that today we have in a form of past dependency. What I mean with the idea of past dependency is the fact that you see only the way to think resources as you did it before. You don't change the view and you don't adopt when you are a company this idea not to seeing resources as only an economic way to make some profit, but not including ecological and social social goals. For example, it's the case with marketing tool, accounting tool. Most of them using in companies does not include social or ecological part. There are two ways in that view for me to change our view. The first one is an historical one, is to include our understanding of the role of traditional management tool in consequences on ecological and social crisis. And the second one is the ability, based on the first one, to build a conception of new management tool. For example, yesterday we heard a presentation about participatory budgeting. It's a way to see such consequences. I will show on this view because when you are working there, one of the great consequences of this way of imperialism and colonialism is deforestation, because there's a great number of plantation which appears after with colonization, and there's a great consequence on the level of forest in this place of the world. And what I will show you based on, yes, you've got there with 1,000 years the difference of the land cover from mid 1,000 years, we got 19 after Jesus Christ, up to now, and you see the disappearation progressive of primary forest. It means that, and with a great acceleration after the 18th century, and of course linked with industrial revolution. And why is there such few primary forests? Because mainly in the global south, it means South America, it means Africa, it means southeast of Asia. You've got plenty of primary forest which disappear with the appearance of a new way of producing things like, I will go further, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, mines, woods, fisheries, etc. And if we want to understand this link between this and our way our way of conception, it's important to think that we built from the 18th century up to now new ways of thinking reality, new way of new management tools, including, that's why I mentioned accounting or marketing, with a great conception, with a great destruction of nature. And it's one of these consequences. You see for the whole world. But in the meantime, for example, in France, if you see the same maps for forest, you see that's not the case. For example, in France, it's also the case with it's also the case in space. You've got more forest at the beginning of the 21st century than you had before. It means the deforestation, for example, if I'm only talking there about the case of deforestation with one resources, the case of forest and wood, that our consumption in one place has no link between the destruction of the forest in the same place. The consequences of our consumption is not on our forest, is on forest elsewhere in the global south, and it is possible with colonization, imperialism, and links between society after decolonizing. If we want to understand it, it's important to see the link between our way of consuming resources and our way of destroying, in my case, forest in other places in the world. I've been working, but we've got plenty of resources on the case of rubber to make, for example, tires for cars or tires for bicycle. And you can prove that there is no calculation at all of the impact of deforestation except the cost. No impact of the ecological or social cost of deforestation to build plantation of rubber and the consumption. And it's the second causes, for example, of deforestation on places where there were huge primary forests in Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka. And at the same time, with our management tools, there was no visibility at all in Western countries at the same time. At the same time, we've got the car culture, which begins with the image of the car of freedom. And it means, if you want to have, at the beginning of the 20th century, a car culture, you don't see at all there's some consequences on deforestation in other parts of the world. What I did there, what we are doing with some colleagues, you can do the same with plenty of resources, including plenty of coastal resources, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, plenty of mines, which depends for our industry, woods, of course, fisheries. So my proposal for this long-term vision and the ability to build an economic growth scalability is to do two ways of working on the history and the link between this management tool and the impact, especially on the environment. And the other one is a proposal of new management tools based on this history, proposing not to have the same impact on ecology and social. Well, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. And our last presenter, Pablo Fernández from the Polytechnic University of Valencia. He's already connected online. Thank you, Pablo, for solving technical obstacles and being here to participate in the panel.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks to you, indeed, because for the quick reaction to my technical problems, a broken car, which has blocked me in the rural world. I'm speaking to you from Algar de Palencia in the Palencia River Valley, between two natural parks, and it's a pleasure being here. Thanks to the previous panelists in the presentation, very interesting presentation. I've just shared can you see my screen? Okay, so thanks to Juan and to Marta for having invited me. I asked very early Juan whether soil health would be a good topic because it's very based on ecological in soil science, and the case studies are not, two of them at least are not really in the coast, but are Mediterranean cases. So, but I think from what I hear from the other panelists that these cases could be a good input to this panel. So I'm presenting very preliminarily the initial steps of this project, Governance for All. I work as a researcher at Ingenio, which is a joint institute between SETU, the Spanish Research Council, and the Polytechnic University of Valencia. And we got into this project as leading the development of the governance models of living labs. I will explain the context of the living labs, soil health living labs. And our role in the project is to promote a system view of problems related to soil health and how living labs could be tools or entities, organizations that could help transform and increase soil health through new governance and business models. So, as you might know, soil is a very important ecosystem that are providing key function and services to other organisms, to biodiversity and humans, from water purifications to nutrient cycling, habitat for organisms, flood regulation, and this could be a hot topic now in Valencia due to the last DANA last year. When we could see that soil somehow failed to protect coastal communities because of the compaction and the urbanization in certain areas. Foundations for human infrastructure, so provider of land resources. And the problem is that at the European Union level, at least, soil are being degraded based on present evidence. These are the main impacts: erosion, loss of organic carbon, compaction, contamination, biodiversity decline. So this has become, at the European Union level and at global level, a central concern for policymakers, scientists, land managers, and farmers, increasingly farmers. The European Union response to achieve soil health by 2030 with key milestones, and overall by 2015 is to increase soil health, to reduce soil degradation, and achieve more sustainable outcomes through several instruments: the soil strategy, soil monitoring law, and the soil mission. The three different, these are the three key legs of the soil policy for the European Union, with different goals and different purposes. So we can enter the debate from many points of views. One, maybe for this panel, one of the main entry points is that soil health is closely linked to primary productivity in agricultural systems. So healthier soils, the implication that healthier soils support higher yields and ecosystem resilience, which is very important to keep on these higher yields across time. And the economic cost of soil degradation is very uncertain, but is currently estimated between these two figures, which is very high. And there are additional costs likely when considering the additional impacts, because it's a systemic threat. So soil degradation has broader impacts over, as Juan said, also over human health and biodiversity loss, which could create like exponential impacts into the future. The challenges are fragmented legislation. As in many resources, as in many environmental problems, there are fragmented legislation and institutions, knowledge, lack of knowledge, uncertainty on how could we revert the situation, barriers to sustainable solutions at many levels, the lack of harmonized knowledge systems to understand how we are making or not change, and the stakeholder engagement. So the engagement mainly of local stakeholders on the implementation of and the development of new policies considering the local context. So this project came into the scene to try to connect solution seekers with solution providers and test solutions in 5 Mediterranean living labs in Spain, France, and Greece, so the Mediterranean regions. We have just started in June last year, and our focus is very much bottom-up approaches to co-design, test, and validate regenerative soil practices with alongside quadruple helix actors, so society, policymakers, researchers, and NGOs, so the third sector. Alongside, very important is the connection between governance models and the business plan. So how do they interface, considering that governance for soil and for ecosystems is not just a single value, it's a plural value, because ecosystems are not just an economic, provide not just economic resources, they provide other kind of services. So this project aligns with the Mission Soil's goal of creating 500 living labs to accelerate the adoption of tailored soil health solutions in actual landscapes. These are where we work. We have the Altiplano Estepario in the southeast Spain. We have Menorca Island. We have the Val d'Udron in France, in the south of France. And we have the two Greek cases in Lesbos Island. So it's representing the Aegean territory, and Tyrea, which is continental Greece in the south, the southeast, south to Athens. So the initial of the project was kind of a bit of a frustration because we entered the project with a researcher in mind, with this framework where we explored the role of living labs, what is the governance model for the living labs. As you know, in political science, we have these three kind of archetypes. We have the market governance models, we have the hierarchy, so the role of the government top-down, and the networks, which are more diffuse. The governance is more in a societal context to create social functions centered or steering the human groups at the more from the bottom. But how these networks are related to markets and the state. So we had this kind of this framework to start with them, but we soon realized that this was not important. So because they are so focused, the local stakeholders, on creating the governance model, that they don't care yet about how they relate to these kind of archetypes. So we kind of diminish the conceptual content of the project and focus on, okay, what you are creating are a network of local stakeholders through the living lab process, and how is your governance model at present, and how should we transform your governance model into the future, considering how do you relate to the markets, to the governments, to different policy levels, and how do you consider soils? So we are continuously asking and continually structuring how we ask them how they consider the soil. Do you consider the soil as a private good, like you consider land? Or do you consider soil as a common resource, like freshwater, fish, timber, as Pierre was saying before, a resource? This is also part of our framework. So this is very quickly, we are now in the process of developing the governance model as a network. And one of the goals of the project is to have a baseline, a governance baseline, so that they can measure in the future, maybe not in the scope of the project, but beyond the project, how governance is changing depending on feedbacks from the impacts that we are creating, from the feedbacks that we receive from soil health, not the land, but what is below the land. So the soil ecosystem, which is very complex, composed of many interrelationships among the microbiome. So it's kind of the relationship between two networks, the human network and the biome network of the soil, which is one of the innovations of the project. So I cannot tell you more. We are just starting to do this. So the main question is the governance model at multiple levels learning. So because they don't have models, what we are doing now very quickly is to prototype the governance model, focusing on key decision-making processes that they have to undertake at a strategic and operational level. And the different living labs are at different stages. For example, the southeast case of Spain, they are creating a landscape partnership. Menorca is creating an alliance with different structure. Tyrea, the Greek, one of the Greek living labs, are focusing more on what is their prototypical governance model. They are still thinking about it, but they have the idea that they have a hive mind consulting with different kinds of experts and decision makers to make the most precise decisions they can. And Solvitera, one of the more complex case studies we have, they are still thinking whether to form a new legal entity, which is also a question for the living labs or not, because they have a deep history. History is very important for all the living labs. So what is their role in a region which is very crowded by other organizations working with the same goals? So the question is, are we more a new legal entity, or are we a living lab to help coordinating all the actors for achieving the common vision for soil health? So very quickly, I invite you to ask us questions if you are interested more in this project, of how we're making progress. But we can already have different preliminary conclusions based on a combination of our experience as experts in other cases and this case. Governance solely conditions the capacity to mobilize stakeholders, we all know that, to coordinate across scales because of this fragmentation across policy and institutions, and align with soil health ecosystem dynamics, which is a very complex and uncertain issue. The early mapping exercises that we are doing reveal these fragmented decision-making landscapes where responsibilities are distributed, very distributed, without a clear coordination mechanism with actors, which is a classical problem for governance. No single archetype governance model fits the complexity of these kind of organizations, but they start as a network. What they will become, we still don't know. We have to combine this with knowledge about their impact on soil ecosystems. The prototyping process that we are doing is very effective for governance innovation, acting as a mini governance experiment, which is giving us a lot of insight on how do they operate now and how can we help them to improve their governance. The cross-living lab comparisons will be, of course, very helpful to inform to upscaling and to inform a higher level policy due to the different contexts of the living labs. And now, as we see that common partner is now emerging, there is a central coordinating partner, and there's still a flexible stakeholder engagement that has to crystallize and make more transparent and robust governance models, and something that you can measure and observe how it is performing in the future. And a key issue is that just the innovation process to create new governance models is a transformation pathway in itself, due to the negotiation, the capacity building, and the institutional creativity that all the stakeholders combined are putting into the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Fernández. Thank you, Pablo. Now it's time for some questions. I will start if you have questions. Oh, yeah, there are questions in the public, so I will save mine for the future.
Hello, good morning. I'm Alex Neff here from Valencia. I have a question for Pierre. The map you were showing us, I mean, the first one from Western Africa, I mean, for me was the most interesting part. I saw here these 3 days, a fascinating map. Map is information, so my question is, the map, you said it's around 200 years old. Do you have an idea who gained access to this map? I mean, governments whatsoever, any markets, which stakeholders had this information? It's a lot of information in this map. The information is very valuable, but was it more or less distributed, or was it just shared among 3 or 4 libraries and in the monasteries, and nobody saw this map? So then the information would be relative. Many thanks.
Okay, we are working on this map. This map dates back from the 19th century. It was a public map. It means that was done by the French Marine in order to place. If you saw the map, there's a little flag with countries, but as it's it's very little, and the goal was to see where for each country to go, and to put before colonization a fortified place for each country, and to link fortified place to guarantee some commerce for each country, and all what was recommended for French state was done then. And that's why it's really a fascinating map at that time. It was also the period where there was no word calculation. calculation with figures, but you watch plenty of statistic card where you got this kind of information.
And it was mainly shared among military.
Yes. In fact, there's some link between military and in France it was called Chamber of Commerce, which was a meeting of commerçants. And this is a link between some great coastal cities, mainly Marseille in France. We finance with the state, with the agreement of the state, so there's an agreement between a Chamber of Commerce and on the other side the state.
Thank you. More questions in the public? Well, in this case, it's my time to start. Yeah? Oh, yeah. I'll wait.
I guess a broader type question maybe. So obviously we're in the session on sustainable economic models and we're talking about climate change and sustainability and so on. And on one hand you've got corporations, basically my question I suppose about economic growth versus sustainability and how can we bring the two along, or is that possible or what's the best route to do that, I suppose, based on it's not probably maybe a simple answer, but yeah.
I can take that.
Yeah.
So as we see it, sustainability is the biggest opportunity probably since the internet. Well, now say either, but you can create a competitive advantage as a corporation, as a business, if you start thinking in terms of sustainability and you go from the short term and going just to the next quarter, your EPS, into integrating. And we've seen that. We've seen food corporations such as Capsa, Central Lechera Asturiana, or Familia Martinez, once they start thinking on carbon emissions, on when are their supplies coming from sustainability standpoint, potentially it's a risk supply that you're getting. If, for example, in Valencia, we have the Dana. Now we started thinking about geographical diversification of our business. Also, we start thinking about water. What's the hydric impact and measuring the water that we're using in our processes. If we know that water is going to be a resource that's not going to be so available in the future, and we start being more efficient in the usage of water, that we are very confident that gives us more insight into the market, and it gives us also a marketing proposition and being more competitive. We're actually lowering our costs through thinking in sustainability terms.
I think there's a fundamental shift there in people's thinking. I think people are starting on that process. They want to be more environmentally friendly, they want to be more sustainable, they want to be looking at protecting the future, but they only want to do that where it doesn't cost them anything to do it. So it kind of goes back to your question you asked that I didn't answer earlier on. So in terms of the car as an example you had, so all that technology is there, but people haven't really embraced that technology because, first of all, it was very expensive. Now it's come down recently because there's new technology coming to replace it. And the second thing was you had to be organised with an electric car. You couldn't just drive off into the country and stop whenever you wanted because you'd run out of battery and you'd stop along the way. So the technology hadn't quite kept up with what was already available in normal fuel cars. So people, although they thought the idea was nice, they thought, well, if it costs me more money and it's more inconvenient, I'm not going to go for it. So it's a matter of convincing people, I suppose, that it isn't all about what it costs and it isn't all about convenience. Somewhat the policies has to change, the tax incentives. So say food, for example, reducing the amount of sugar and salt. If there was a positive tax incentive for companies to do that, then people would move towards more healthy options in their food choices. Maybe. Yeah. So I think we're at the start of a revolutionary shift in thinking, but we have a long way to go to make that happen.
Yeah, but my opinion, if I can intervene, in my opinion, circular economy is also about allowing the inclusion of kits in previously built products. For example, in the case of the cars, you have a traditional car, and you can partially substitute some components to make it more sustainable. But then you have a problem. I don't remember if you were, Pablo was mentioning legal obstacles. Then you have legal obstacles for the government to recognize this novelty in the car. So there are some conflicts that maybe are not evident, but that impede or put difficulties. One is this, and the other that I was thinking, and I will ask you if any one of you want to answer, is that, innovation is disruptive. So every innovation makes partially obsolete previous innovation. So there is, and maybe this question is for Juan, there is a tension because the innovator wants to control the rhythm of the innovation. And sometimes this makes to bias towards a particular kind of products and towards, I don't know, some, what I would like to highlight is that we need more self-awareness of the difficulty and to understand what is the main idea of the circular economy, and not only say, well, I am going to greenwash for a while. Yeah. I don't know if you have any...
No, I mean, going back to her point, I feel that for the last 20 years, it felt from an economic standpoint that if you want to be sustainable, you have to pay more. It's not price competitive, not being sustainable. She mentioned about we need to make tax incentives in order for food industries to reduce sugar and salt in their products. But what we are seeing is that through innovation, we've been able to reduce sugar and salt in some products, maintaining flavor through this encapsulation technology in the case of new caps. And we are also seeing that some food industries that are getting into sustainability thinking further than just I want to comply with regulatory policies. I want to actually understand this because we live in an environment. I mean, this might be absurd to say, but understanding all the different changes that this environment is going to have and how this is going to affect my business processes, if I'm able to understand that, I'm going to be more smart, therefore more competitive. So that's why so this has been like a big shift in my mind the last year, because for the 4 years that I was previously working at KMZero, it was more of like sustainability is going to be a bit more expensive because it takes more cost, but it's like the correct option from an ethical standpoint. But now we're starting to see that through all the different layers of technology that are getting into the food systems, and I can only speak about this sector in particular, we're actually being more competitive in price. We're more efficient.
That idea precisely you mentioned was, I think it was the last book of C.K. Prahalat, the strategy at the bottom of the pyramid. I mean, how to avoid unnecessary attributes to make a product, a sustainable product, affordable for, he was Indian, he was born in India, and he was trying to make products affordable for everybody. And yeah, the idea was to avoid these unnecessary things or to reduce, unhealthy items by more sustainable things. But the problem is that sometimes consumers pursue sort of exclusivity. I mean, and this is putting in compromise those strategies. So self-awareness or awareness of the importance of sustainability is not about paying more, it's about paying less in the future. I mean, it's a sort of a temporal trade-off. Yeah, but I agree with what you said. Okay. I don't know if you have more questions. I think we have time, yes. You mentioned, Pierre, that history matters. And well, you said, you used another word, but history matters was the expression that Paul Krugman employed for the same thing, for this path dependency. And do you think that maybe when we anticipate that technology is gonna bring us easier, sustainable products, we say, well, it's gonna be cheaper, so we become more sustainable in our preferences? Or so do you think that our preferences determine the rhythm of innovation, or the rhythm of innovation can influence the society? What do you think?
In the future?
Yeah, we were talking about the future.
Yeah, I'm not sure in the future about technology. I don't think technology. No. In fact, I'm not sure that technology will change so much about the conception, the view of the conception. I'm not mainly. I'm not working on it, but I'm not sure it will change or it will dismiss the cost.
Okay. And for this is an open question for the one you prefer. How do you see Europe in this context of, we pretend, I would say, to be more sustainable than others, but it seems we are a bit losing some races. I don't know, how do you see Europe as a cluster for the future? What's your opinion?
Well, that's kind of a hard
Europe
question.
is very big, so it contains a lot of countries.
Europe should be leading the way. Okay, we have the big investment from things like Horizon Europe and previously Horizon 2020, and they're major investments in research and innovation. And we should be realising the benefits from those investments in terms of that self-same innovation. And sustainability comes into all of that in the modern era. So there is hardly a project in Horizon Europe, for example, that doesn't have a sustainability aspect to it. So I guess we should be leading the way. We may not always lead the way because we may not always get to the end point that we envisaged in the first place in terms of our innovation. But I think things are changing. I hope things are changing. And it will be pushed by people. So it will be pushed by, it can be pushed by us in terms of the research projects we do, but that's not enough. It needs to be pushed from the consumer, as you were saying, maybe kids, and use at the same point, yeah, Joanne, just build it in and get that ethos change and that kind of a different way of people thinking so that it's pushed from what the consumer wants. And my point on policy change was, if you take something like the pharmaceutical industry, for example, of which I'm heavily involved with in Ireland, the pharmaceutical industry is so highly regulated that all they care about is the regulations, okay? So the product meeting that. So where that becomes the centre of focus, then change isn't going to happen very fast, okay? So we need to look at what will drive change. Policy will drive change. Another very simple example is we used to use an awful lot of plastic bags in our grocery shopping. I presume that's a European-wide level. And that really changed when it had to change, when you had to pay for them. Okay, so I know that you don't like the costly model all the time, but that produced a very fundamental change. So I'm not saying that cost has to be the change. What I'm saying is that something has to be the driver of change, and Europe should be the driver of change. We're investing enough money in it.
We must.
Yeah, we must. Yeah, it probably wasn't a great answer, a roundabout, circular answer, but yeah.
Thank you, Helen. I have also a question for Pablo. It was a curiosity when you mentioned that your presentation was relying a living lab focused on 5, I think it was 2 locations in Spain, 2 in Greece maybe, and 1 in France. Sometimes I tend to think that we tend to think on commonalities, on common elements, and what were the main difference that you would highlight when analyzing the 5 living labs? I mean, for the different countries. So some exotic or idiosyncratic issues that you would mention.
Well, that's not an easy question. That's complex, but I would kind of start maybe from the historical factor that you have mentioned. History matters, and history matters in different ways. You have the inertia of the history, the path dependency, things that you cannot change easily or at a low cost, at all levels, resources, policy, political trade-offs. And you have the very events, so the very events linked to the cultural context, political interventions in situ or relationship with other countries. That's a difficult question, but I would focus on how history has conditioned the current governance models that each living lab has. And in Greece, for example, they are very, very much conditioned by the 2008 crisis because they still don't have stability in the legal context. That was a lesson, took me 1 year to understand why we're so reticent of forming an association, for example, a legal entity to govern their living lab. And they didn't want to do that. And then in one of the last meetings, workshop, they were very clear that the legal tax and so the fiscal landscape was changing so fast that they wanted to remain flexible. And this has a very resilient aspect in their behavior. They want to be flexible, to be resilient, or to absorb the changes in the political landscape, in the policy landscape. And for example, for the Spanish case, they already have a legal entity, they already have an association and a foundation, because maybe the recovery process in Spain was different. So they felt confident on forming a foundations to canalize the funding. So, but the culture is the same. It's a Mediterranean culture. They don't want things to be imposed top down. They are reticent of researchers, policymakers, and experts coming from the outside and imposing the governance model. And this includes me and the team from Ingenio. So we soon very much realized that because we are experts in transdisciplinary processes. So then we started asking questions about what do you want to develop? And in France, it's very much different. So the history is that they have 4 decades on implementing organic agriculture in the region. They are one of the regions higher in organic production in France, 25% versus I think 5% for the rest of the country. And so the institutional landscape was very rich. And so the discussion, when we have discussions, they don't get blocked. They just have many ideas that comes from this rich history and culture of creating organic agricultural enterprises and institutions. So you have this common cultural identity of not being, rejecting being imposed a governance model. At the same time, they have different cultural and historical processes that limit or create new opportunities to develop their governance models. So I think history is a perfect example, and also culture.
Thank you, Pablo. I don't know if there are more questions. Well, just to conclude, if you don't have any other...
I think there's one.
Yeah? Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
One more. So my question goes to Pierre again, and I thought this sounds easy, like a management tool, and then we just add like not just profit, but also social impact and environment, and we all agree and we're done, but like who does this? Like who proposes the tool, who adopts it? Like, you know, what would be the actors that would make this possible?
The main issues, there's a part of legal conflict, including in Europe with the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainable and Reporting Directive. Maybe some of you know about this directive, and now we are going back with the directive Omnibus because of the vote on 2024. There was, for example, in this case, some rules on ESG impact, the way of measuring, and we are going back because you've got a huge comments on medias explaining why it's so complicated to get, etc. And we are going back. So this is part of a democratic fight to impose to companies to include this social and environmental measure. And maybe just to add something on the question you asked, it's not only a question of preserving our environment, it's also, in my view, a way of preserving Europe. Because when I mentioned, for example, the map, plenty of our resources came from other parts of the world. We are not in the time where we have an empire, we are able to have these resources. And it's really important to preserve, to keep some resources and to consume less if we want to keep a European sovereignty.
Thank you, Pierre. There is another question, maybe the last, I don't know.
There is one last question that I wanted to ask. I don't know, maybe some of you could answer it. Is it that, do you think that making soils more productive and improving also soil quality will encourage companies to produce more in Europe again, or to buy more from farmers in Europe and offer local products to consumers? Will this reduce production costs without negatively affect farmers and consumers' pockets? And also, can some kind of legislation be promoted to encourage the supply of local products?
I answer first the last time.
It is a very complex question. In my opinion, well, it is also my final idea. I mean, sustainability is about the future. But in the present, we have our own problems, maybe due to the past, as Pablo was saying. The problem is that although sustainability is an imperative, every regulation, every decision, every current decision involves a different distribution of the burden of the cost. And this is important. Maybe it's going to affect positively the cost of producing in the next future. But the problem is that in the present, some farmers perceive that they are paying too much compared to what they will receive. And well, we need, I guess, that we need more awareness of that we belong to the same scenario, and what we are doing is going to be good for us and for the individuals that will continue with our project in the future. I don't know if this is the answer you were...
I suppose part of sustainability is your carbon footprint, okay, in terms of producing products that in Europe, that remain in Europe, rather than importing necessarily or exporting. So I guess there could be, would it be an idea to have your carbon footprint on your packaging? Okay, so that people can make sustainable choices in terms of that sort of aspect if they know about it. Hard to know, would people do that? But I think as time goes on and maybe education goes on and knowledge goes on, that maybe informed choices would be easier to do. You know, like palm oil and all of those products, you know, they're now being informed choices. You're told that that's in your product. And you can make the choice then to buy or not to buy. So, I don't know.
And there is another idea, I think Pierre mentioned, that we are balancing sustainability together with security. Because sometimes to be sustainable requires, or I don't know if you mentioned too, requires to import products from the rest of the world, and we are not sure if we will be able to do that, although the price seems to be cheaper. we are not sure about the willingness of the producer to sell us in a couple of semesters. So there are a lot of balloons to balance at the same time. Well, I think it's time to complete this session. Thank you very much to all the panelists. I think you have given us well the best of your research, for we all to be aware that there are different perspectives to see a common problem, a common issue. And well, I hope this is not the end. We will continue discussing in the future with different positions and different disciplines that you represent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Still good morning. Not yet good afternoon, still good morning. And I mean, I was requested to inaugurate the meeting, and I has been also requested to inaugurate the closing of the closure of the meeting. So I started thanking those people that thought in create such a nice thing as this alliance, and I am continuing thanking people. So I want to, first than nothing, I want to thank all the persons that has been working on this from many months in the past, and because of the idea of trying to make something a little bit different in format. I hope you have found it interesting. They put the heart, the brain, and the soul on this, and thank you to all the people in the organization, and also thanks to all of you that has made it possible. I mean, things happen because of persons. Then we were thinking on transformation, and because transformation is implicit in the mission of EU-CONEXUS. But I mean, life is transformative. I mean, transformation happens. It's going to happen. The philosopher says that none drop of water pass again by the same way. And people from the biotech will explain me that even though the place will be the same, the drop will be different because of the molecular interactions. So transformations happen. And as we know, as we know, because bad transformation is possible, bad transformation is more often than good transformations. And then transformations needs to be driven. Good transformations are driven by good motivations. And what is good motivation? It's so easy. Good motivation is something that is good for the other. If anything is good for the other, it's not going to be good for me. It's going to be even better for me. And I think that this is something that all of us we have in common. And there are people that has spent time, effort, and their life in order to think about this and to create models in order to facilitate that this so easy and synthetic concept of so difficult implementation be understood for others that has the challenge and the power to implement. And that concept is the economy of common good. And I was in charge to present Stefano Zamagni, but I am a physician. So I do the Hippocratic commitment of primum non nocere. So, and if there is anyone else that can do things better than me, the best thing I can do is to invite my colleague Juan Sapena to present the professor. Juan, and thank you for coming and for putting also your soul in making things happen. Thanks, Juan.
Well, it is my honor. I don't know what happens with my telephone. It is my honor to be here introducing Professor Zamagni. Every time I have had the opportunity to listen one of his lectures, I've got impressed. He's been a lot of things, and precisely one of the elements that distinguishes him from other economists is one of the reasons why the Catholic University of Valencia exists, that the economy is to serve the persons, and the persons are not to live isolated, but with others. He's been a lot of things. I had the opportunity to meet some former students of him at the University of Bologna, and they are still impressed with what they had the opportunity. Now they are in the European Commission, but they still remember the ideas that Professor Zamagni was giving them. I have some of my students in microeconomics, and I was suggesting them to come here because Professor Zamagni is the author of one of the most interesting books in microeconomics, because it has a particular thing. A lot of books in microeconomics start, by what's the market and why do microeconomics exist. And he starts by presenting us the evolution of the different economic systems across history, to explain us that people along history have tried to solve the same problems using different tools. Well, in addition to professor at the University of Bologna, he's also fellow of the Human Development and Capability Association, and also he has been, until very recently, the president of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. He is here. We try to explain him, the initiative of EU-CONEXUS. We are a network, an alliance of 9 universities, all of us in coastal cities, concerned with, the balance of, natural resources, technology, and persons. Okay, so he is here as an economist to defend, I guess, that we economists, as Aristotle said several hundreds or thousands of years ago, the main aim of economics is to pursue humans' happiness or well-being, okay? And sometimes during recent centuries, we've been thinking about, satisfaction of human needs of something individual. He has a book chapter that has a title. Of course, I suggest you all to read this book chapter, Happiness and Individualism, a Very Difficult Union. And I think that this is one of the things that we Christians have to remember, that we are in a sort of expedition crossing together, and we depend, as also Adam Smith said in the theory of moral sentiments, man is in permanent need of his fellow man. So thank you, Professor Zamagni. It's a pleasure, it's an honor. We will again have the opportunity to learn from you. And well, we would like to have you here a lot of times more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And let me express my gratitude to the Catholic University of Valencia for the invitation that I received some time ago and that I accepted very happily. And let me also thank Professor Juan Sapena for his very generous words that he addressed to me just a few minutes ago. I'm happy, I said, to participate to the closing session of the EU-CONEXUS conference on a topic of great relevance in the current historical period we live in. So let me express congratulations to the Catholic University of Valencia for having hosted and organized this peculiar event. In the minutes that have been allocated to my closing remarks, let me start from an important distinction coming from Cicero. As you know, Cicero was a famous Roman philosopher and jurist. In the Western world, in fact, the legal system is a tribute to Cicero. Cicero, in one of his major works, distinguished two words, civitas and urbs. And he gave the following definition. Civitas, he wrote, is the city of souls. Urbs, on the other hand, is the city of stones. I think that there is no need for me to comment because these words are self-explanatory. It is a fact that until the 18th century was prevailing in the Western world, in particular in Europe, the first model of Civitas. Civitas as the city of souls. If we go around and we admire our medieval cities, Spain as well as Italy and other countries are full of these medieval cities. And we observe their structure, how they've been set up. We immediately understand what does it mean, a city of souls. But what happened at the beginning of the 18th century, and above all towards the end, to remember, 18th century is the century of the first industrial revolution, which occurred in Great Britain. Great Britain was the cradle of the first industrial revolution. Since that period, we observe in our countries, in Europe, and then later also elsewhere, such as the United States, a transformation. Transformation from the Civitas model to the Urbs model. That is something that most people do not consider, because this transformation occurred slowly, bit by bit, not by accident or by specific decisions. What have been, that is the question, the causal factors which determined such a transformation? A transformation for which today, on which today we are reflecting. And in fact, the EU-CONEXUS is exactly interested in provoking as was said at the beginning of this presentation, a new transformation, because the present one is not sustainable. That is true in particular for the urban coastal cities. As you just another to remind you, the word sustainability was coined in the year 1713. Before did not exist. And the first scholar who introduced this word was a German scientist in the forestry area called von Carlowitz. Von Carlowitz published in 1713 a booklet which circulated very rapidly in many different countries in Europe. And it had major impact. In that booklet, he says, we have to plan our cities in such a way as to maintain a sort of equilibrium between nature and culture, which means between the necessities of people living in a particular area and the necessity of nature. Otherwise, we run the risk of not obtaining sustainability. That was the first time that these words occurred. If you check in the dictionaries or in some encyclopedia, before that date, the word sustainability did not exist. I close down the parenthesis. So the question is, what have been the major causal factors determining the transformation from the city of stones model, from the city of souls model to the city of stones model? One of these causal factors has to do with the economic side, pure economic side. In other words, speculation in housing, in dwellings, etc. It is obvious, and there is no need for me to explain the mechanism. We are very familiar with the speculative mechanism, because speculation does not only occur in the financial side, as many people believe. Speculations occurs in many other areas, and one of these other areas refers exactly to the so-called city planning, the way we built up a city. So that was the first reason. You know from history what have been the major characteristics of the Industrial Revolution. The idea was to accumulate more and more capital, fixed capitals, machineries, as David Ricardo called it, in order to start up the new way of production, etc. As you know, before the Industrial Revolution, the productive process was artisanal. Artisans were the major determinants of that, even though the market economy already existed. This is one of the many mistakes that most economists continue to make when they identify the market economy with the emergence of capitalism. It's not true, because capitalism, the capitalistic market, emerged in the 18th century. But the market economy as a model of social organization started in the 15th and 16th centuries. Consider the School of Salamanca, the famous Salamanca School. If you read the works by Francisco de Vitoria and many others, they describe a market. But that market economy was not capitalistic type, and it was based on the idea of civitas as city of souls. So that was the first factor, purely economic reason. A second factor has a different nature. He had the nature of social, in the sense that started that phenomenon that nowadays it's under our eyes, which is called gentrification. I don't know if you ever heard of this name, but you had better learning because it's an important thing. Gentrification, it's a way to exclude from the city centers of the cities those categories of people who belong to the lower social classes, but using not force as in the past, but using economic mechanism. And what is in this case the economic mechanism which operates this phenomenon? The prices, the price system. In other words, the idea is to increase year after year the price of housing, dwellings, etc., in such a way as those people who cannot afford paying those prices are, in a sense, committed to go to the outskirt, to go outside. This process is called gentrification. And it has a major social impact, as you can understand, and I will say a few words in few minutes. A third causal factor of the phenomenon we are talking about has to do with the characteristics of the third industrial revolution. Today, we live in the third industrial revolution, the revolution of the digital technologies. If I say artificial intelligence, everybody understands what do we mean. Now, what is the characteristics of the third industrial revolution? To provoke concentration. At the time of the second industrial revolution, the factory systems, factories were distributed over the territory. You could have a factory in the center of Valencia, another one nearby, another one in another city, etc. On the other hand, in order to generate scientific research in areas such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., etc., you needed to concentrate the brains of people. And so that is provoking in our cities. I live in Bologna, in Italy, and I am observing what is happening. Bologna is completely different from it was until a few years ago. Why? Because the European Union has decided to locate in Bologna the so-called very big brain, electronic brain, which is huge. The result is that they have to attract the scientists with their families in order to live in the proximity of this hub, technological hub. And that is just an example. The same thing occurs in many other areas. If you go to California in the United States, we immediately realize what I am saying. In other words, the research poles, the poles of research, they tend to create what are called economies of scale. Because in order to have knowledge, information circulating rapidly, you need a territorial contiguity. And that is the third causal factor which tends to determine a phenomenon which is called the urban coastal area. Why coastal? Because in general, these places are near to the coast for understandable reason, etc. So now the question is, what have been, at least so far, the major consequences due to the transformation I am talking about from the two models of cities? Transformation from the old to the new model of cities. Again, the consequences are very relevant. The first one is environmental. Environment, everybody today knows that we are destroying our environment. The phenomenon of CO2 is really endangering our sustainability, the air. But there is not only CO2. Another gas which is even worse is CF4. If you ask a chemist, those experts in chemistry, they will explain to you what are the effects of this gas, CF4, which is even worse than CO2. Why? Because CO2 can be fought against. How? Using trees. That is why the trees, nature, it's our ally. Because during the night, as you know, the trees absorb CO2, and in the morning, they release oxygen. But against CF4, which means the gas produced by plastic, there is nothing to be done. Because CF4 destroys forestries. They destroy nature, not only human life, but even natural life, animals, etc. So the first major consequence of the creation of these big cities in the name of the principle of city of stones and of not of souls is environmental degradation. And this is, there is no need for me to spend words in order to explain what is under our eyes regularly in our cities, in our society. A second major consequence is what has been called social disruption. Now, this is a very important point, which in general has been neglected by the economists, and that it's our responsibility. We have to admit that we economists, of course I'm talking of the whole categories, there are always exceptions, we are responsible of this mistake. And what is the mistake? The following, that of believing that human beings, in order to live a decent life, they would be content with private goods and public goods. If you take any book of economics, the jargon always refers to either private goods or public goods, with such a division of labor. The market takes care of private goods to produce and to distribute them. The state or the government or other public authorities, they should take care of public goods. Full stop. So where is the mistake? The mistake is that we human beings, we need two other categories of goods. Not only private and public, but also relational goods and common goods. Why we almost never talk about relational goods and common goods? What is a relational good? A relational good, which was introduced in the economic literature, as you know, by Amartya Sen, the Indian economist who obtained the Nobel Prize in economics also for this contribution with his idea of capabilities. Relational goods are those goods whose benefits depends on the relations between me and you, me and the other, between what to say in Latin, ego and alter. That is the characteristics of a relational good, that they presupposes the possibility of encounter. I can consume a private good, for instance, a meal, even alone. In my room, I can stay alone and consume a meal. Or if you go to the restaurants, how many people are sitting at the tables alone? They consume a private good, but they will not enjoy that meal as much as if they could consume the same meal in company with somebody else, talking each other while consuming. That is a simple example, of course. So what happens is that was anticipated already by the one who introduced this meeting, by Aristotle. Aristotle was the first to say that the ultimate purpose of a human being is happiness, not utility. That is the other mistake, that economists confuse utility with happiness. And what is the difference? Aristotle, 2,300 years ago, provided the answer. He wrote, utility is the property of the relation between a person and a thing. A thing. Okay? If I am hungry and I eat a piece of bread, that piece of bread gives me utility. What about happiness? Happiness is the property of the relation between one person and another person. And that is why he concluded a famous sentence. You had better take notes. Nobody can be happy alone. It takes at least two people to be happy. And that is fantastic. Because already in his time, he understood that we human beings are not like animals. A dog does not care about happiness. A dog wants a utility, which means that if it is hungry, provide him with some piece of meat, and he will be okay. But we human beings are different in this sense. So relational goods are a major ingredient of our, in particular in this historical period. But as I said, mainstream economics does not care of them. The other category is common good. Common goods, in English commons, are those goods which should not be identified with the public goods. That is the other mistake. Because common goods are those goods which have to be governed by community. Because common and community have the same root. In other words, cannot be a public authority to govern a common good. When that happens, it is always, I said 3 times, disasters. You know that the first important author who took the courage to write that was a lady, an American lady. She was because she passed away. She was professor of political theory at Princeton University in the United States. In the year 1990, she published a book whose title is revealing. The title is Governing the Commons. Commons means common goods. And in that book she said, we cannot pretend to govern a common good neither using a market mechanism nor public mechanism. But we have to use community instruments, community categories of thought. For that reason, even though she was not an economist, she obtained the Nobel Prize in economics at the beginning of this century. And then after a couple of years, she passed away. That is interesting because she was the first to open our eyes. And the funny story, just if you allow me, is the fact that her husband was an economist, mainstream economist in the same university, but he did not get the Nobel Prize. She got it. And she was the first lady to obtain a Nobel Prize in economics. Why? Because her husband believed what she contrasted. And there was a sort of as you can imagine, dialectics within the family. But she was right, and she won the battle. So I close down the parenthesis. The fact is that I come to the point. The model of city of stones goes against relational goods and common goods. And because we need to interact among ourselves. But if we create big cities where anonymity is the rule, you can imagine the implication. We will never be able to enjoy relationality. And mind you, young children, they suffer today for that. Fortunately, there are certain countries and certain cities where this phenomenon is not very represented. But go in certain cities in Europe, they are completely anonymous. And the children, they do not have a place where to meet because the city is full of skyscrapers, big buildings, etc., etc. So we are losing relational goods and as a consequence, happiness. And today, as you know, every year, the United Nations, an agency of the United Nations, they publish the index of public happiness in various countries. And there is a strict correlation, which is the following. In those areas where the model of urbs is dominating, the degree of happiness is inferior, goes down. These are statistical, there is a statistical evidence, and there is no point in disputing it, etc., etc. There is a third implication, consequences of the phenomenon we are talking about, and that is a typical economic. At the beginning, before I said that one economic reason for that transformation was economies of scale. That is true. But today, we are discovering that there are also diseconomies of scale. Not only economies, but also diseconomy, which means that when the scale of production goes up too much, the level of productivity goes down. And so some people are considering, intelligent people are considering, why should we continue to behave in the way we have been doing in the last couple of centuries? Because we are observing, now I have no time to enter into the demonstration of why these economies of scales generates a loss of productivity. But I assure you that the scientific literature on the subject is capable of showing what I just said. And if you are interested, the basic idea is that of tacit knowledge due to a famous book published in 1962, whose title was The Tacit Dimension. Michael Polanyi is the name of the author. Michael Polanyi is a relevant. He was the brother of Karl Polanyi. Even Karl Polanyi was a great economist and anthropologist. But Michael Polanyi was more a philosopher, economic philosopher. And today, the idea of Mark Polanyi are re-emerging. And they are re-emerging with a great force. Of course, but that is, I don't know if that interests you, but Michael Polanyi, the two brothers, they came from the Czech Republic. But during the Soviet invasion, they moved. One went to the States and the other to Great Britain. But while Karl Polanyi remained with his religious ideas, previous religious idea, Michael Polanyi became Catholic. And if you become Catholic in a country like Britain, you had problems, be sure. There are many examples. Consider the case of Cardinal Newman, for instance, or even Alasdair MacIntyre, who passed away 4 months ago, etc. Because they tend to isolate. But nowadays, he passed away already some time ago, Michael Polanyi thought is going back. And his basic idea is that of tacit knowledge. There is a knowledge in every person. Of course, some people have more, other people have less, but everybody has knowledge. Unless one is a racist who believes that there are human races, etc. And he said, if you want tacit knowledge, why it is called tacit? Because it's inside the brain of people. To circulate, you have to manage the organization of work and the organization of living in such a way as people can encounter each other. In such a way as to allow people to exchange sometimes information which might be believed to be irrelevant, but that's not true, because I can tell you something which in itself is not very relevant, but what I told you might provoke in your brain, in your conscience, a major transformation, etc. So that is why, even from a pure economic point of view, today we have to rethink the so-called city planning. Finally, a fourth major consequence, connected always to the same phenomenon, has to do with the political side, namely precarious democracy. You know, we know what does it mean, the democratic principle. Aristotle. Who invented the word democracy? Aristotle. Before Aristotle, the word did not exist. And he was the first to lay down the basic principles of the democratic rule. But democracy presupposes that people can freely interact among themselves. Presupposes that people can exchange their view in a dialogue. I respect your views and you respect my views. And by means of an open dialogue, we can enrich all of us. Now you understand, if we do not create spaces, loci spaces, where people can see each other in their eyes and can freely discuss, the democratic principle will suffer. And in fact, today, in our society, we are suffering a precarious democracy. Everybody, there is no need for me to give you examples, starting from the United States. Look what happens in the United States and also in our countries. So we have to be careful, because democracy is not a once-for-all principle. Democracy needs to be nurtured. We will nurture our body eating, but also democracy needs food. And the food is called dialogue. The food means confronting our respective positions, etc. So now these are the four major perverse results connected to the transformation I was talking about. The final point, I have only a few minutes left. What can be done? People might say at this point. We can do a lot of things. First of all, we have to insist our countries and obtaining at the European level that the European Parliament and the European Commission decide to include the issue of the urban coastal sustainability with these names in their program of activity. Because it is obvious that sustainability is an issue. But we have to be specific, urban, coastal. And I am sure that if a group of countries, Spain, Portugal, Italy, France, etc., they organize themselves and they ask that, the European Commission cannot say, no, we do not want. And that is a first goal that can be achieved, even in the short run, because this is a goal which is not like other goals referring to geopolitics. In other words, referring to what other continents. But in our continent, which is Europe, we can do what we decide to do. Second, what we have to rethink at the cultural level are the models of architecture. I don't know if you ever heard the expression relational architecture. This is a new expression which has entered into the jargon in the last few years, both in our countries and also elsewhere, etc. What does it mean, a relational architecture? After what I said before about relational goods, the meaning is very clear. We have to conceive our city planning in such a way as to allow the possibility of generating and consuming relational goods. And that is possible. There are, I cannot make names now, but there are some experts and authors in the architectural area, mainly in Spain, who are working in this direction. So we have to circulate these ideas to let people understand that it is possible to change again. Finally, we have to reinvigorate those instruments which are called a forum of deliberative democracy. I don't know if you ever heard the expression deliberative democracy, which is a model of democracy which was invented for the first time by Aristotle and then was forgotten, unfortunately. Today we talk about authoritarian democracy, elitistic democracy. No, we have to go back to deliberative democracy, creating what are called deliberative forum. What is a deliberative forum? It's a locus where citizens, companies belonging to the economic sphere, and the public bodies, they intervene on the basis of certain sets of rules in order to deliberate on important and relevant questions. And the deliberative forums, they started in some countries in Europe, not everywhere, but in some cities. So that proves that it's possible. But because if we permit citizens to interact among themselves and decide about their future, you can be sure that certain bad things cannot be done. So this is what I wanted to say to you as a closing section of the EU-CONEXUS conference. And I would like to conclude with a word of hope. We should not follow the example of the misoneists. You know what are the misoneists? Misoneism is a Greek word. What does it mean in Greek? Are those people who say, oh, there is nothing to be done. No, we have to continue this way because the world is whatever it is. Don't believe misonist. When you meet a misonist, kick him or her off. Because misonists are dangerous. Because, in particular for the young people, because they spread the idea that there is nothing that can be done. Oh, no, it's not true. It is possible to modify the situation. That is what the message of hope that I wanted to transmit to you. And I conclude with an expression which I always loved by Tolstoy, the famous writer Tolstoy. In one of his works, he wrote, be careful, if you feel bad, you are alive. But if you feel the bad of the other, then you have become human. So that is the wish I transmit to you, that we have to strive to become more human. Thank you very much for your attention.
Professor Zamagni, just a few words to say thank you very much for your ideas, for your hope, and for allowing us to be more aware about the idea of sustainability, because what is the thing that we want to sustain? This is the objective of economies and society. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to have you more times at the UCV. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello. Gemma talks about motivation, so I'm here to motivate to stay a little bit longer, waiting for paella. And talking about how to motivate you, Tetian give me one great idea to talk about that to approach the paella you need the password, and the password is in the last sentence of my speech. So you have to wait until the end of my speech. I will not take so much time, so it's starting with like a phrase, dear colleagues, partners and friends, talking about the friends, talking about the EU-CONEXUS family and the friends. As we reach the close of this remarkable conference, Transformative Research for Urban Coastal Sustainability, I wish to express my sincere gratitude and admiration for what we have achieved together over these 4 inspiring days here in Valencia. 3 days of the conference and 1 day of the workshop before. We can come from across Europe, from Klaipeda to Zadar, from Bucharest to La Rochelle, from Athens to Waterford, united by shared vision to make our urban coastal regions not only more sustainable, but also more livable, equitable and resilient. Over these days, we have witnessed how diverse disciplines, cultures and ideas can converge together a common purpose. EU-CONEXUS as a European university, European alliance, and finally talking about our family together, has once again demonstrated its strength, the capacity to transform challenges into opportunities through collaboration, innovation, and community. We begin first day with discussions on data-driven decision-making, exploring how artificial intelligence, environmental monitoring, and digital twins can redefine urban management. Our session on sustainable health and disease management reminded us that health is an integral part of sustainability. The presentation connected human, animal, and environmental well-being, highlighting the need for One Health approaches in our coastal ecosystem. In the panel on adaptive and resilient urban system, we heard a clear call for cities that are not only resist change, but adapted to it through sustainable infrastructures, energy systems, and participatory design. Equally vital was a roundtable on community and stakeholder engagement, because no transformation can happen without the people it is meant to serve. We heard compelling examples of local collaboration, social inclusion, and participatory governance. Finally, today's discussion on sustainable economic models offered a forward-looking perspective, how to create prosperity without compromising the planet. And also we have this fantastic lecture after all this. The poster session have been a testament to the creativity and dedication of our researchers and students. Their work, from genomic approach to pollution control to resilient architecture and coastal heritage management, reveals the diversity and excellence across our alliance. It shows that EU-CONEXUS is not only a university network, it is a living laboratory of European innovation. I extend my warmest congratulations to all presenters, to our poster award winners, later we'll know who they are, and to every contributor whose work enrich our shared mission. This conference has not only summarized where we stand, but also charted the course ahead. The 5 major themes we have explored: digital transformation, health, resilience, community engagement, and sustainable economics, together form a roadmap for EU-CONEXUS research in the coming years. They are the pillars upon which we can build our next collaborative projects, our doctoral networks, and our transnational infrastructures. We are entering a new phase in which EU-CONEXUS must continue to act as a bridge between science and society, between innovation and policy, between the local and the global. The challenges in front of us are immense. The accelerating climate crisis, the need for equitable access to health and technology, the adaptation of our cities to demographic changes, and the ethical governance of artificial intelligence. But these are not reasons to fear. They are invitation to courage and cooperation. The research and ideas shared here in Valencia show us that we already have the creativity, expertise, and solidarity needed to face them. Let us take the spirit of this conference back to our universities, laboratories, cities, and classrooms. Let us continue building the EU-CONEXUS community as a model for European research integration, open, interdisciplinary, and socially engaged. As we leave Valencia, may we remember that sustainability is not a destination, but a continuous process of transformation, one that depends on our shared responsibility, empathy, and imagination. Thank you to Catholic University of Valencia for their wonderful hospitality, to EU-CONEXUS Research Council and all other included in the organization, and to every participant who made these days intellectually rich and profoundly human. And thank you, Marta, especially. Before we all rush to catch flights, trains, perhaps enjoy a few more cups of coffee with this wonderful weather outside, let us take a moment to appreciate that we have survived 4 days of intense discussions without running of caffeine, Wi-Fi, or enthusiasm. May your inbox be kind when you return home, and may your next online meeting at least feature a pleasant virtual background. Together, we are shaping the future of European coastal cities, making them smarter, fairer, and more resilient. Let us continue working together towards the transformative vision. Thank you, and see you at the next EU-CONEXUS conference next year. Thank you. Still motivation, you need to see me here again. So we have the winner of poster contribution, and the winners are Nora Judich, Niclea Eteklus, Ronan Champagnat, La Rochelle University, and other universities together. So congratulations to winner. Are they here? Please. So, and now waiting for paella. Thank you all, and see you outside.